Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Appreciate you joining. We really just want to share how you can get the best out of what you might be working on and wanting to do to respond to either what's happening now or to learn into the future. If you need a particular site that's quick and easy to build with a very focused reason, we put out some information in a blog that I'll show you as a resource later that would be helpful if you learned what you wanted to do today, but you wanted to reference back to it. There's a blog that really outlines the steps. And it also points to the new site that we had put together in the lookbook, which I'll show you in just a second. But just want to make sure everybody understands what we're here to share. We're going to focus today on how to use SharePoint within Office 365 to build a crisis management site. And this is something that internally we did, and a colleague of mine and I were brought in to quickly consult and just give them some guidance on how to use SharePoint so they could stand up a site that internally is our COVID-19 response site. And off of that, we were getting a number of different questions from people that were just looking to do some of the same. And so we took that a number of asks and turned it into some information and, of course, what we're talking about today. So I hope you find this informative both for any current response that you're working on, but also just a lesson in how SharePoint is flexible to your needs, whatever that might be, either in a very reactive, responsive mode or in a proactive mode. And of course, you'll see how you can change things very easily. So my name is Mark Kashman. I'm on the SharePoint team. I work at Microsoft. I'm a senior product manager, and everything that we're going to talk about here is really contained within SharePoint with a few nuances for either how you create it. You can do it manually, or we have this now as a site design that you can download. But it also might be respective of where you're pulling information from. If you work in an environment where you are not allowed to bring in external content, there'll be a couple things that I note that I have just as samples where I'm pulling in data from Twitter. So I'm pulling it from the internet. That doesn't limit how you might design your site, and I'll definitely walk through all the different options. But the context, this is not at all meant to be a sales motion. We really want to just share the information and get to the how-to. But to put it in context, there's a lot of things that you can do with SharePoint. This is just a way to add a site, either significant size or even just a very simple homepage, to the broader context of your intranet. It's easy to link to, it's easy to create, and of course, when you don't need it, it's easy to make less visible. But just to highlight, we're using the communication sites technology, which you can start with a blank template. You can start with a template that we provide out of the box, or a custom template that you built if you're doing this programmatically a lot. And then there's one resource that I'll demo from, which is, we call it the lookbook. And this is where you can pull additional materials from that actually prop a site in the context of different scenarios. And I'll walk through primarily what we're talking about today, crisis management, but highlight that it's a handy resource to pull from, but also to learn from if you're thinking about building programmatic site designs. So you can do this more quickly if you have a number of different response needs or a number of needs that match how you design this site. So we'll use a lot of what communication sites offer out of the box and show you how you can work with them. But to dive into what you're going to see is the context of a crisis management site. That is just the term that we're using. This could be in response to a viral outbreak like we're seeing, or certainly this could be something that's more in a weather emergency, or just as there's any need for change management and you quickly need to put together information and have that be a two-way street. That's really what this is. But for crisis management, it's a new template that we have available, and it's designed in a way where it's leveraging the communication sites with 3 different section layouts and a number of different web parts. So what you see here is just a call out of what web parts are being used. It is certainly just a blueprint. There's a lot of options that you can take in the web parts that you use, the section layouts that you then use to segregate some of the information, and you have a lot of different choices on how things look and feel so that you can get the most out of what you need and make things as visible and as usable as they need to be, and again, without spending a lot of time. So you'll see I'll be using a text web part. We'll be working with the mega menu just to adjust that a little bit, talk about the news web part, the value of quick links, The people web part, certainly to highlight people that are going to be on point for working with this different response. The need for a Yammer Web part if you're opening up a two-way street here on the page, and then just simple use of the Twitter web parts. So this is really all it takes. It's adding a few web parts, configuring them, and then making sure that you start to layer in the content, and that can change over time or be additive over time. So hopefully you'll see really within the first 10 minutes what's possible. The two things that I'm going to show you is two pathways to get to the same end result. And once I switch into demo, I'm actually just going to take a moment to remove my video, and then we'll get to really just focusing on the demo. But the first pathway is if you use the lookbook site to provision an actual new site with content that you go then and change. It'll save you a lot of time, and it'll at least put it into the same framing of what we had set up as the design of a crisis management site. Very easy to change, lots of drag and drop capabilities. You can add or remove sections, add or remove web parts. Very flexible, but it gets you started much quickly, and I hope you'll see that. And hopefully, if you need it, go use it. You don't even have to wait for the end of the webinar. You can go right to the lookbook just as much as I'll show you. The next is I'm going to start with a blank slate and walk you through if you can't go use the lookbook site, or you just want to go and configure some things more manually or just more simply, you can certainly do that. So I'm going to start with just creating a blank site and adding to it, adding section layouts, adding the web parts, and that's really the intent to walk through both how you can do it programmatically and how you can do it manually. First is the SharePoint lookbook, which is really a lookbook that will grow up to provide a lot of things from Microsoft that will help you a quicker time to market. So if you go into the lookbook, which is lookbook.microsoft.com, and if you want to go and do this along with me right now into your own tenant, if you have that capability, the one note is the one action that I take from the lookbook to create the site is I do need to be a tenant admin. And so at Contoso, I get to be a tenant admin. At Microsoft, this is something where we waited for somebody else to create for us using the crisis management site design. If you're not a tenant admin, but you have the right to create a site, that's the second demo that I'm going to show you. So two different places. One will be a little bit quicker to get started, but also that balance of what is your role at your company. If you're a tenant admin, you can do both of the things that I will show you. If you're not a tenant admin and you have the ability to create a site or have a site created for you, and then you are added as an owner, you can accomplish a lot of this. You may just need to contact your tenant admin to do one or the other. So I'm on the lookbook site. If I go to view designs in organization, besides that there are a lot of templates, and this is maybe beyond your crisis or our crisis, this is a good resource to look through to see what other site designs there are. But I'm going to jump right into crisis communications, and that's just the name that we gave it, and it'll give you a little bit more visual of what it is, some information about it. But the unique value of the lookbook, if you want to use it to get started more quickly, is you can click the button that says Add to your tenant. So after I click Add to your tenant, this will actually take me to a page that starts to ask me a few more questions before it does anything in my tenant. And if I need to re-log in from when I was practicing a little bit earlier, that might take me just a second. So really guide you through the email. If there's anything that needs to be addressed for me, it'll send me an email when it's complete. We give you a blank title. Just for today, I'm going to put in Friday. So you can see the title come through just so you know when it finishes. And I'll just adjust the URL. The key thing here is this is actually similar to if you create a site directly from within SharePoint in Microsoft or Office 365. You can choose the site title. You can, of course, affect the site URL, which are the two things that I'm doing here. You can name this whatever makes sense for you. If it's directly related to COVID at this point in time, do that. If it's related to, like Hurricane Katrina, you could certainly type in that. Whatever it is, this is just your title and the way you would describe it and your preferred URL, especially if you have a naming convention, stick to it and nobody's going to stop you. There is one option if you've applied any custom theming. This one, because this type of site most realistically would go into something like an HR web or a human resources space. I'm going to go in and choose Contoso HR. In this demo environment, it has a unique theme to it, and this site will adhere to that and, again, save me a little time for any unique changes. Next, I'm going to click Provision, and you can imagine what's happening now. This package of content will go and trigger a job within the tenant to create a site and add the elements that you'll see here that I showed you in the slide, and really within it's taken somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes. And we've heard some feedback of some people in a couple of distant locations that it's taking somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. So this is cranking away, and I'm going to turn to then start the process of creating it manually. So hold in your mind, this will go and create a site right now in my tenant, and it'll be named Crisis Management Friday. And then once it's created, you'll see it. It gives me a great place to start. Looks exactly like I showed you on the slide, and it just helps you get started much more quickly. So let me turn over to my other. It's actually the same environment that it's being provisioned into. So what's happening in the background is actually going into this environment, which is Contoso Electronics 1A. And I'm here on my SharePoint page, which is if you go into your app launcher and you click the SharePoint tile, that's where if you have the rights to create a site, whether it's a team site or a communication site, this is where you can do it from. So I will go into SharePoint, which I'm already at, and click Create Site. This is going to bring up a dialog box that's then going to let me choose between creating a team site or a communication site. And since the template that we're using and the focus here is for broad announcements, broad engagement across the company, I'm going to go ahead and click communication site. That's our preferred. I had mentioned before that you can start off with our out-of-box templates. With the one that I showed you from the lookbook site, that is a custom site design, similar to what you see down here. So if you have already a custom site that you use to provision topical or informative type sites, there will be nothing stopping you to use that. And again, go in and configure it how you need, and you may have already done that a number of times. So there's the ability to have and use your own custom site and configure it similar to what I'm going to show you. There are a couple other places to start, but for ease of just walking through how to do a lot of individual steps manually, I'm going to choose blank. And for this one, I'm just going to give it a name of comms response, so it's just unique into this environment, so you can tell the difference between the two, and then click Finish. And this will do a similar thing of provisioning a new site, but as it sounds, it'll be super blank. And this is now a new site that I can change the menu. I can change and add sections and add web parts, which is what I'm going to do now for the next 10 or 15 minutes, really populating this site so that you can see how I can get it to look similar to what's being provisioned for me on the back end. And to be frank, it's actually completed. So let me take a second to show you the site that's been created, and then we'll go through the manual steps. So you can see here, here's the new URL. And when I click on it, this is now a real functional site with the ability for me to, of course, go in and change it. It's going to give me a lot of placeholder content. At the top, navigation, you can go in and change this very quickly for what it says and the URL that it points to. And there's a lot that you can do in the top navigation. This is using our mega menu. So you can cram a lot of information or minimize down to just the very important things. If I go into edit mode, you'll see some of the parts that I mentioned in the graphic. Here's the text web part. Here's the news web part. As I scroll down, you'll see we're using the people web part. A couple of ways to use quick links. Here it is literally just to show text. You can also do it to show images or highlight different content. And then down at the bottom is a 3-column layout with a Yammer Web part, or where to add the Yammer Web part, and 2 different Twitter feeds coming from 2 different sources. So it's just pulling content coming from the CDC Gov and the World Health Organization. And that's it. That's really what I'm going to go in and set up. But as you see, this is set up for me. And now I can go in and I can adjust the news. I can create new news. Of course, I can change the text. If there's something where I wanted to add an update, I could certainly do different things with color. But I'll really show you that when we step through the manual. but I just wanted to highlight when you go through the lookbook and you create a site, it does create a real site that you can go in and edit to your heart's content and different requirements that you have. You can go in and start to permission. And I think one important step initially is if you have people that are going in to come and help you. Like I said, I'm logged in as the admin, but I want to make sure that another colleague of mine who's going to help me, Megan, is going to have access to this site to help me with the initial setup. Once we're done with the manual process, I'll show you how you can then make sure that the site is available to everybody in your company or to whomever you need to have access to. You can set permissions pretty quickly. So I'm going to add Megan, and right now she is added as a site visitor, but you can change that at any time. And because I want Megan to help me with this site to go and adjust content as a response owner, if something needs to be added, she can do that the same as I can. So I'll give her full control, and that'll now put her into the site owners category. And when we go in and add everybody, you can give them just visitors, a visitor role, which means it's a view only. They can't adjust the site. They can't add content. They're mostly in a consumption mode, except for one spot where we'll highlight, which is, of course, through the Yammer Web part, where if you want to have a two-way dialogue on the page, you can do that too. And I'll show you how you set that up. So I'm going to minimize that. This is now the new site that's functional and pretty ready to go. Layer in your content, start to message out its availability, link to it from your most parent level navigation from another site, send emails, send it as a link in chats and groups and Yammer discussions. Easy to get the word out once it's all set up. But sometimes you stare at a blank slate, or sometimes you aren't the tenant admin, or sometimes you can't go and use the lookbook for regulatory reasons. So like I said, the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to set this up. It won't look exactly like the last site because I'll save a little time. I won't add as much news or as many quick links, but I think you'll get a sense of how to use communication sites pretty quickly, and certainly in this context of the crisis management. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my sections. There were 3 sections that we had. At the top, I was using the 1/3 left column. Below that, I'm using a 2-column layout. And then just below that, I'm using a 3 columns layout. And so real quickly, I've got my section layout. In the top section on the left, third, I'm just using a simple text web part. And if this seems like I'm looking over or kind of talking to myself here a little bit, I'm having some pre-defined text and just making a couple of quick adjustments to that. So if I go in and highlight text, I can certainly bold it. If I wanted to change the color, if this is an update or something that's important, you can, of course, adjust things like color. You can hyperlink. You can do a number of different things. But for another day is a full walkthrough of a lot of the features. I just want to highlight a couple that will be important for how you might use it during this during a crisis to get set up very quickly. So that's our text web part. Here on the right, I'm actually going to use the news web part and just configure it in a way that you saw in the site. So I'm going to use the hub layout. The hub news, this is going to be news just from this site. And there are a number of different things once I start adding news, which you start to need to do. So I'll add news in just a second. On the left-hand side here is where I'm going to start to layer in people. So I'm going to use the people web part. These are people that I want to highlight. This will pull from Active Directory, and we'll just start to add in our first, which is Megan, who I'm working as here. And then we will add her colleague, Alex. And certainly these are just examples of individual people. You can also type in and add specific groups or aliases that might be more response oriented, like an Ask HR or a safety lead alias or something like that. But again, for sake of time, I just want to go in and start to work on a few things. So next I want to add quick links. So if you add quick links, once you start adding links, you have a lot of choices for the different layout. I'm going to add a few here just for time. From a link, this is not to cater to anything specific, but I'm just going to add a quick link to thing, just as, of course, you can link to anything. And that's just the quickest, easiest one for me to put in, just to show you that, of course, with quick links, you have to have a link. But what the real value is when you go and start to adjust it. So for here, I'm just going to add two quick links and just give them a unique title. I'm going to choose an icon, which is really handy, where you can go in and adjust down. And this will be for safety. And we'll just do this one as a people icon. And you can start to see how it looks here on the left. And of course, as you add more, I'll add one more quick link. This time will be fair. We'll do it with Yahoo. And click open, and then just do a couple little text. And we'll do this with a group. Again, you can choose any icon. They're searchable and really easy to set up. So right below it, next thing that I want to add is different from the template, but I think helpful from what the template was trying to show, is of course you can add a video. So this might be a quick message that somebody from your leadership team put together to just console, comfort, add context, do whatever. And of course you can show a whole channel, a single video. For this one, I'm just going to pull a unique video, a single video, that has some relevant context here. It's a safety video. And just keep moving. Again, you can do lots of different things to configure it, to start at certain places. And hopefully what you see throughout is you design what you need, and you can do it very quickly. So going left to right on the very last section, I'm going to add a Yammer Web part. This will be something that I can program to either a new conversation that I had set up with a specific community to specifically respond to this. So this will be using a specific group, and this group is called the Crisis Response Team, and automatically that adds it to the page. If you hadn't created a specific group to take questions, provide feedback, to provide resources and links, you can certainly go and create that in Yammer very quickly, add whomever needs to be the owner in Yammer. But the context here is I'm bringing a group conversation where I can have dynamic chats, responses, and have somebody maybe assigned to monitor it in a short term or long term. But to add it to the page is very easily, and you can see what I've done here. There's a lot of, again, different configurations. You can make it so that it takes up a lot of the page if it's important to see more information, or if it's just for quick hit Q&A, you can certainly do that. And then quickly, I'm going to add two of the Twitter web parts. One here, and I'll program that against the CDC for our example today. And that feed gets pulled through. And then last here, Twitter again. And for this one, I'll add the World Health Organization as an example. So everything gets pulled through real time when you're in edit mode. But just real quickly, I'll go and republish this. And of course, what was a blank site is now a great start within, hopefully you saw just there in 10 minutes, a way to start with a blank site, or like I showed you before, to provision from the lookbook. And getting to this point really is half the battle. This is a site that you could just start to layer in one or two news articles, get the right text and language for how you want people to be aware of what the site is about, to add the owners, and I'll show you how you can further adjust for people. If the video changes, becomes out of date, or just no longer is needed, you can easily remove that. You can see the quick links coming through, and then those dynamic feeds from Yammer and Twitter coming through, and I'll just take a couple actions to like, and certainly to reply, so you can see what it looks like. Thanks for so you can, of course, post that down, and now that will be something that continues the conversation. But again, a lot of the value here is this is the center of gravity for the information that you want to provide out to everybody. If you have questions, if you have feedback, if you have concerns, people can do that right here, and you can really aggregate a lot of information and have it be informative. So let's talk about adding news. I've got a couple examples, and then we'll talk about people. So because I am a contributor, or like you saw me give as an admin, I gave Megan contributor rights to the other site. That means that they can create news. So if you need to add more people who are going to contribute news as it comes, and it could be a variety of people through a couple of different types of news, you can certainly do that. If it gets to be a lot of news, you can change the layout. And once I get into articles, I want to show you how you can pin something to be the lead article that you want everybody to see. And then as other news flows in, as you do other news posts, you can certainly control that. So let me go in and add a news post. If you want to bring news from the outside world, you can do that too as a news link. But again, we'll start with basic, just creating from blank. And I'm going to go in here and just grab some quick text to talk about things that might be top of mind, just to add a little bit of information here. So you can see what it's like to quickly create news, post it, and then manage how that goes. So I'm not going to really do a lot here except for add an image at the top. And you can see there's a lot of different opportunities to bring in the image that you need. For these types of sites, it might be helpful to go just grab something simple from background, and we'll do something that's a little bit more teamwork oriented. This is pulling from the Commons, Creative Commons from the internet. But if you've got a set of content that you have in your organization, you could, of course, easily add that here. So this might not be the best example of images that we'd use, but for timing, I'm just going to go in here and grab something so that you can see how you can control the layout, the look, and the feel. But again, for this, most likely you're not going to spend a lot of time. You're just going to want to get news out there and get it out there quickly, and maybe even simply without an image. But just here on the left, you can certainly create news very quickly, even use a template if you've created a page template. But for the timing of this, I just want to get it out and start to show you a couple other features. So I've now published news, which will publish it to the site. And you can start to see where it starts to pull it in. And because I only have one news article, only one news item shows up. But again, let me do one more quickly so you can see what it looks like to pull in a couple of the different news articles. So I'm going to create another news post, and this one a little bit more focused around working remotely, which certainly we are all, a lot of us are doing that more, and happy to say doing this web from home and able to help both internal and external and stay connected. Certainly that's a big focus of a lot of what we see information being pushed out in how to stay connected. So certainly encourage, of course, everybody to do that. And that might be something that you put into this site, providing best practices that are specific to your company, or if there are external resources you want to pull in, you can certainly do that. So I'm going to add another image here. And this one I'll just give as a background, something that hopefully will reflect what we're talking about. And again, to keep it simple, get the news out there. I'm going to post this down. And now you'll see two news articles. One of the things you can do unique with news is what I want to show you when I go back into edit mode and go to the news web part. When I put it into edit mode, if I start to want to lay it out a little bit differently, I started with Hub News. I can maybe change it to a list, side by side, use different tile layouts, whatever works best for the amount of news that you have, the amount of space that you want it to take up, or simply something that will be a little bit more accommodating over time as you publish more and more news in the days to come. But the one thing I wanted to show you is how you can actually order the news. So maybe I want to have the containment is key, even though I published it first. I want to have it be the first thing that people see as the uppermost left article. So I can go in here and choose that as containment is key. Click it, drag it up to the position that I want it to be in. And now you won't see it here anymore because this is more of a picker. But when I click out of this experience, you'll see now that containment is key is on the left. And any news that I now publish, I only have two. But if I publish a third, a fourth, or a fifth, they'll start to build out here from the top to the right and on down left to right. So this will always be in the topmost position, and that might be important for a site like this to highlight a specific piece of news or a resource that you want to point people to. A news article can be just that, a pointer to a new video, maybe one that you didn't want to put on the homepage, but a new, like a daily update that you might want to do. And you can do it through your webcam, record it quickly, put it in a news article so the distribution is there. The last thing I'll say about news, why you might want to use news in a crisis situation, is news is, of course, what we see on the site, and it's important to have it be as visual and as easy to access as you need it. But also, as people start to engage with this site, the news will flow out beyond. So if I go into something that is more at the company intranet just for a second, when I go back to that place where we started to create the site, in a number of minutes, you'll start to see, and it's already showing here, containment is key. This is actually from yesterday, just to be clear. The news will show up here eventually. But if it's a top site, you can deem this news to be news for everybody. But it may be something that you want to do local at the site level, or you may want to have it flow, as you see here, out to more places. For me as an individual, when I go to my SharePoint, which is, again, where you go when and anybody who's logged in clicks the SharePoint tile, they'll see news for them, which means it's news from sites that they're active in, sites that, news that's being pushed down at the org level, or news that is just related to people that they work with. So it's an aggregate of news, and you can make the news flow from the crisis management site out beyond the site itself, which can be, of course, just increase the visibility of news that you're sharing and the timeliness of it. The last thing is, this is also the same view that you would get if you're leveraging the SharePoint mobile app. That critical news would show up the same as it flows here. It flows in as a new news article that's relevant to those individuals, however you deemed it so. And again, if you make that a parent level, you can certainly do that. So that's a little bit more around news. There's not a lot much highlight around configuration of the web parts unless we come back and there are questions of things that you can or can't do. But the other thing I wanted to show you is one unique feature that might be applicable to the different people or the different resources that you're highlighting as people to contact. So you can say, you can type in your own text. So this might be the main response team or aliases like I had mentioned. The thing when you go into this descriptive mode is Megan, as a day job and what her common role is, might be as a marketing manager, but she's been asked to lead this effort around crisis response. And so you can type in here her specific role. And again, I'm just going to grab a little bit of text to add that. So if I go in here and add a unique piece of text to describe what is Megan's role in this particular crisis, I can do that. And if I need to, I can add a profile link. If she's pointing people to a quickest way to contact her, you can put in an email address. If you want, you can type in a URL that she's commonly sending people to for an FAQ or whatever it is that you might find helpful here. This just extends the value of not only can people hover over and learn more about Megan when this is in a published mode, but you can also add that context. So that may take up a little bit more space, but of course it would add to the importance of what you're trying to promote here. Not only who is Megan in her common role, but what is her role? And if I have a question, what might I reach out to her about? Same with Alex, I can go in and add simple text. And again, if this is a person, you might want to tailor it to the individual. If it's to a group, you might want to tailor it to the group and what they're here to do. Again, once I go in and republish this, you'll see the experience with people. You get a lot of information of how you add context. But you get a lot of information that's just coming from your Active Directory. So anything that you had in about Megan, if people need to go and chat with her, if this is a scenario where everybody is in the office, if not, you can, of course, have that contact information and people can reach out directly, and that's just part of the how the people web part works. I want to show you the experience if you add a video. If you've not seen adding a video, we all know what video in a web is like, but specific to Stream, it will go in and be however long the video is. It supports up short and long form. You can provide feedback, but some of the information that's helpful is you can turn captions on. You can speed things up. There's a lot of things to go into full mode. But one really helpful thing is if people are really looking for something that is specifically what they're looking for and it's a longer form format, they can do a search and jump right to the point in the video where they're going. So sometimes that's just part of training and what we like to promote as value of using the video. But if you've got a really long form 60-minute update that's just critical to get out to people and they're looking for certain segments, you might guide them to type in a keyword and navigate directly to that point in time of the video. It's really easy to do and it really does save a lot of time if it's a longer video. And then last down here, showed you already a bit of Yammer and how it interacts. With Twitter, it's a real hands-off thing. This is a real-time feed, truly coming from Twitter. And as much as whatever CDC Gov and who are publishing, that's what you see here. It is engaging where you can click, you can send things to people, you can like it, but it really is based on your Twitter account. This is the one note that I mentioned earlier. If for some reason you are in a tenant where you don't, your regulatory requirements are that you can't bring in information from the internet, being a public website like Twitter, you certainly don't have to. And this, you might use this space to just use the Yammer all the way across. So instead of a 3-column layout, you might do a 1-column layout here. But again, highly configurable, very easy to adjust over time, and make it whatever that you need. So moving away from the content on the page, I want to show you a little bit about how to edit the top navigation and how to start to use the mega. This I'm going to do really quickly because it does take a little bit of time when you really want to start to have a very broad set of information in the navigation. So what I'm going to do is just quickly take advantage of the ones that are already there, and I'm clicking Make Sublink. And just going to keep, again, what's in there. It doesn't make a lot of sense for this site, but then I can start to add new. So I'll just, again, use very quick URLs. This can point to anything, and you can have the text display anything. So I will, for sake of time, I'm literally typing in the first thing that comes to my mind, but you may have people resources. You could have additional videos. You could have forms that people need to fill out. You could have links to other sites, other pages in the site, specific documents, whatever it is that's important to put in the top nav, and you can start to bucket it, and I'll show you what that means in a number of different ways. What I'm going to do here with safety is I'm going to actually promote that, so it's now its own top-level site. So I'm going to add just a couple more things to show. Different types of documents. This one is just off of that concept of publishing FAQs. This might be a document, and this is going to just promote it. Sorry, I meant to make that a sublink, and I can move this up under documents again, and then make this a sublink. So within the navigation, you have 3 layers of hierarchy. So home is the top level documents, and then under documents, FAQs. And I can add as much as I need to. But just to give you a quick visual on that, and you can see a new feature that's coming here. I'll just highlight that. There's a ways to target content. That was going to be the last thing that I was going to talk about, both for the content and coming soon for the navigation. If you're tracking what we're doing with some of our new announcements, I just want to make sure that that was called out because that just showed up, but you won't see that in your tenant if you're trying this. So clicking save, and you'll start to see how we get a couple of different hierarchies. And now we've got to the start of a mega menu, which is really just drop downs and bucket. So here's home. Under home, we had the 3 buckets of documents, pages, and site content. And then I started to layer in that last level of FAQs. I could start to add more under documents, more under pages, or even a new additional category that would show up to the right or start cascading down the page. Safety right now is a top level, and it's a link of its own. If I start to link things underneath it, you would start to see it appear here like home with a drop down and additional buckets of areas where you can start to layer in content. So absolutely, you can go in and take advantage of the navigation to point to other resources and certainly bring that up a level. The next thing I'm going to do is if you're a site owner and you want to, after you've communicated this out, even if you've started to message out its availability because you've finished content, you may want to add this to an existing site. And I mentioned that this theme takes over from what the HR team described as the theme that they're going to use. But I'm just going to go in here into the site information, and you'll see that right now there is no affiliation to a hub site or a parent level site. But in this Contoso environment, we do have Contoso HR, and because I am an owner within the human resources team that was charged with creating this site, I want to add it to our overall HR hub, and we call that here Contoso Hub, Contoso HR. When I click Save, it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to take this whole site that I'm working on, and it's going to bring it underneath the HR web. So now there's a couple of levels of navigation. Just to be clear, I added it to the Contoso HR site, which I'll click on just to show you what that looks like. But we still have our comms response. We still have the hub navigation, all of our content's intact. But now this site is a part of another group of sites that are being managed by HR that, of course, are promoted to everybody in the company. If I go to that level, you'll see here that I'm landing now on the parent level of the HR hub, and news is actually going to aggregate. And because I've just joined this site, that news that I had published to the response site, the crisis response site, will actually flow up to this level, adding another layer of visibility. If people commonly visit the HR hub, they would see news from lots of different sites, not just the crisis management site. And pretty soon, because it's a part of the hub, the news will automatically flow up to this level, and that takes about 10 or 15 minutes as it's based on search, and that's something that you would see pretty quickly flow out to get to everybody. Let's go back to the site and do one last thing. I had created the site as an admin, or if I were had the ability to create the site because I can create sites of any type. I want to go in here. I'm back on the comms response site, and I want to go in and adjust permissions so that everybody in the organization can access it. So I'm going to go and click Share Site, and this is something, of course, if you've not done it, it can be a fairly bold step. It's a little bit easier for me in a demo environment, but there are, of course, some default, unless you've got your own and customized, different Active Directory ACLs for everyone except external. And this is a step that if you don't take it, and you don't certainly have to send email, I would encourage you not to send email if you choose everyone. So what it's going to do is make sure that everybody in your company, if that's the goal, to be able to access this site, especially when you start to join it under the Contoso HR or your own hub site or broader site in any navigation form. Or people start to send this out in mass communications via email or Teams or Yammer, however you're communicating, or I should say in the number of ways that you're communicating these days, you want to make sure that everybody can actually get it and you don't hit that first initial hurdle of, everybody's getting an error because I forgot to give everybody permissions. This is an easy step where everybody gets a view as a site visitor. So here you see when you add somebody, unless you change it as you add them, they are in a read-only mode. And back to where we had added, if I wanted to add a new site owner, I'm going to go in and add Alex because I listed him as somebody who's going to be helping in this effort. And before I add him, I'm going to give him full control. Of course, I'll send him an email. And you'll see, similar to how I had added Megan earlier, now Alex is a site owner, and we've got a number of different, a lot of people. And that was the email that just showed up saying that I've given permissions. So my intent is that is the end of the demo. You were following along and clicked Create Site or went to the Lookbook site. The real value here is you can get up to speed and not think about what it is that SharePoint can or can't do. You probably have already done it. And our intent really is just to help you get that site set up. If it's a useful one in your organization, to however you want to configure it. I have one last slide that I want to show you that really is the various resources. And it's not an exhaustive list. It's really targeted to just the ones that we have here today. But I'll go and let me put this into show mode so it's a little bit easier. But I'll turn to questions, but just to walk through the 3 resources. I hope by now you've seen what each of them offers. If you want to go back and review either this video, we'll have it available on demand if you want to share that with somebody that could use a walkthrough and how-to. There's a blog post that essentially walks through a different setup and configuration, but really the same idea. Create the site, get it outlined. One of the things that I wanted to show you was I had originally set up just an app. And so in the blog, if you want to do a quick sketch on a napkin or have a quick meeting with a couple of different owners, articulate what it is that you want to get across around the content, and that'll help define what web parts you might use or what news sources you might want to pull from or what Twitter feeds. But once you have that quick blueprint, it's very easy to implement. And again, this blog walks through the how with lots of links to additional resources around working with communication sites, going to the lookbook and finding the crisis communication site design and how to use that, and then just the basis of working with web parts and pages. The lookbook is an easy one to remember. It's lookbook.microsoft.com. You'll see a lot there. Just navigate under the different site designs under organization, and you'll see the crisis communication site design that you can walk through and set up the same as I did. Again, the caveat here is you have to be a tenant admin. And last, there's a great mechanics video. If you just want to learn more about communication sites, it's 10 minutes, it's very short, and it really gives a nice insights of all that you can do. Again, our intent is not to be selling here, it's to highlight that there's a lot that you can accomplish based on whatever your response requirements are, and we hope useful at this time. And I'll just put a plug. If you have any questions for me, I'm pretty easy to reach on Twitter, or if you have any needs for direct email, I'm just MKASHMAN @Microsoft.com. That's mkashman @Microsoft.com, or on Twitter, I'm just mkashman. It's Kashman with a K, MKASHMAN. We hope this was helpful. We hope that you're staying safe and connected out there. Very much thank you for your time. We'll make sure to get the recording and the information and any questions that you have addressed. But make sure, wash your hands. SharePoint is there to help. We are here to help. And we hope that you can do it quickly without having to think about the technology and just get the response that you need. So thanks for your time, and we'll close at this point.